What do I know? Montaigne's essays begin with this question. He does not offer doctrines, he does not claim certainty. Instead, he observes himself and writes honestly about what he finds. Essays is not a systematic philosophy book, it is a record of thought. Montaigne writes about his habits, his fears, his weaknesses, and his contradictions. I portray not the world, but myself, he writes. Through himself, he seeks to understand humanity. Montaigne distrusts human certainty. We are easily mistaken, easily biased, and often most dangerous when we are most confident. So he refuses to conclude too quickly. I do not know is not ignorance, but intellectual honesty. Montaigne does not idealize humanity. Humans are inconsistent, emotional, and imperfect. But this is not a flaw to be corrected. It is our nature. He is less interested in heroes than in ordinary human life. Death appears constantly in essays. For Montaigne, thinking about death does not diminish life. It sharpens it. By accepting mortality, we learn how to live more fully. Montaigne belongs to no system. He resists authority, dogma, and social convention when they threaten independent thought. Essays does not tell us how to live. It asks us how to think while living. Essays feels remarkably modern. In an age of uncertainty, constant opinions, and loud convictions, Montaigne offers something rare: calm reflection. Now, let's explore how Montaigne's practice of self-examination and intellectual humility can inform modern thinking habits, decision-making under uncertainty, and a life guided by reflection rather than certainty.
We're all kind of obsessed with this idea of finding ourselves, right? We're constantly told to look inward, figure out our passion, create our own unique path. And it feels like such a modern thing, this whole project of self-discovery. And this right here, this is basically the gospel of our times. Remember that famous speech Steve Jobs gave at Stanford back in 2005? He pretty much laid out the modern blueprint for a fulfilling life. And you hear this advice everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Graduation speeches, self-help aisles. It's become the go-to guide on how to live. But here's a wild thought. What if the best modern advice is actually 500 years old? What if I told you that this whole idea of looking inward, this massive project of self-exploration, was actually kicked off by a French nobleman nearly half a millennium ago? Yeah, this whole turn inward, this obsession with the self and our own personal experience, it's not new. Not at all. It's got this incredible and honestly kind of surprising origin story. So let's meet the guy. His name is Michel de Montaigne. Picture this: a 16th century French aristocrat, a judge, a diplomat, not exactly the kind of person you'd expect to start a revolution in consciousness, right? But believe it or not, he's basically the great-grandfather of every blog, every memoir, every personal journey we talk about today. And to really get why his idea was so radical, we have to look at the world he was living in. Okay, so just imagine this for a second. Montaigne's world was pure chaos. France was literally tearing itself apart in these brutal religious wars. Everyone on every side was consumed by this dogmatic, absolute certainty that they were right and everyone else was wrong. And what does Montaigne do? He does the complete opposite. At 38 years old, he just quits. He walks away from public life, holds himself up in the tower of his castle, and decides to study the one subject that nobody seemed to be talking about: himself. But that created a brand new problem, didn't it? I mean, how do you even begin to study something so strange, so new, so completely uncharted as your own mind? Well, to do it, he had to invent a totally new form of writing. Seriously, think about that for a minute. There were no guidebooks for this. No one had really done it before. How on earth do you map the inner landscape of a person when you're the first one to even try to draw the map? His solution? He called his writings essays. Which is just brilliant, because the original French word essay doesn't mean what we think of as an essay today, a formal structured argument. Nope. It literally means a trial, an attempt, a test. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just experimenting, just trying to see what would happen if he really paid attention to what was going on in his own head. And that right there was the revolutionary act. He made himself the subject of his own book. He literally wrote, "I am myself the matter of my book." Think about how wild that was. Nobody had ever done that before. He took his incredible mind and just turned it inward. He decided he was going to explore the whole messy, contradictory, and totally fascinating world inside his own consciousness. So, what did he find? Once he started this totally unprecedented journey, what does the world inside a mind even look like? Well, the first thing he discovered is that the human mind wanders a lot. It doesn't just stick to one big, important subject. And he showed that absolutely no topic was off limits. Nothing was too big or, as you'll see, too small for him to think about. I mean, he dived deep into these really profound emotions, writing about sadness not just to describe it, but to figure out what it's even for. Then he'd switch gears completely and dissect something like lying, asking why we struggle so much to be honest with each other and, even with ourselves. But then he'd also write about totally everyday things, like smells, and how a certain scent can just transport you back in time. And he wasn't afraid to get, well, weird. I mean, he literally wrote an essay called Of Thumbs. Thumbs. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but it shows you just how committed he was. If a thought popped into his head, no matter how strange, it was worth exploring. And through all of this wandering, he stumbled upon his biggest, most important discovery. See, the world around him, the world of dogmatic certainty, saw the self as this fixed, stable thing, like a stone monument, built on solid, unshakable beliefs. But what Montaigne found inside himself, it wasn't a monument at all. It was more like a stream, constantly flowing, always changing. He'd feel like a skeptic one day and a stoic the next. And he realized maybe that's what we are. We're not one single solid thing. We're a continuous flux of ideas, moods, and, yeah, a whole lot of contradictions. Okay, so a 16th century nobleman's diary, why should we care? Why does any of this still matter today? Well, because the project that he started almost 500 years ago, that's our project now. Like I said, he's the great-grandfather of every blog, every memoir, every journey of self-discovery. He's the one who gave us permission and the words to take our own lives seriously as something worthy of study. He's the one who showed us that an ordinary life, if you look at it honestly, is packed with universal truths. So how can we live a little more like Montaigne? Well, here are a few takeaways. First, try what he did. Just observe yourself. Pay attention to your thoughts without immediately judging them. Second, question everything. Don't just accept the dogma that's handed to you. Test those big truths against what you've actually experienced in your own life. And third, remember that wisdom isn't hiding in some dusty old library. It's right here, in the everyday stuff, in your habits, your weird thoughts, even, in your relationship with your cat. And that really is the heart of it all. Montaigne wasn't trying to find the answer. He wasn't trying to build some perfect, finished system of philosophy. His entire life's work, everything he wrote, it was all just an attempt to figure out one simple but incredibly hard thing: how to live. How to live well, right now, inside this messy, imperfect, always changing thing we call a self. And maybe the best way to sum him up is with his most famous question. It's playful, it's brilliant, and it's so profound. He asks, when I play with my cat, how do I know that she is not playing with me? And that just captures his spirit perfectly, right? It's that humble, curious doubt that flips your whole perspective upside down. And it reminds us that maybe, just maybe, the greatest journey we'll ever take is the one inside our own head.